see many familiar faces in this crowd, and it's lovely to see you. I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and also for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This board would like to express our appreciation to our community partners, first responders, utility repair crews, county, state, and federal agencies that have come together tirelessly to provide aid during this time. We are grateful to all who have given so much to our Western North Carolina communities in helping this relief efforts. We would like to take this moment of silence to acknowledge the significant loss sustained by community throughout Western North Carolina. Our students, our family, our staff, and our neighbors have been impacted tremendously. You may be seated. This time I would ask that I get a motion to approve this agenda.
So moved.
I believe that's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? At this time, I'm going to recognize Dr. Jackson for a presentation of Buncombe County's response to Tropical Storm Helene and the reopening of our public schools. And I believe I want to call that a hurricane and not a tropical storm, if there's no objection.
Good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon to those who've gathered with us, to our community and parents. There's no question that our community, Buncombe County and Western North Carolina, have encountered much loss, a loss that has added significant trauma to our community. As we have had the opportunity to be throughout the county to see the devastation, it has been unbelievable. No matter how many times we see it, I still find myself shocked as if seeing it for the first time because of the magnitude of what has happened in our community. Among the loss in our community, loss of lives, loss of homes, significant damage to homes, loss of cars, loss of family members, loss of friends. I'm extremely brokenhearted to share that since the storm's arrival, we've also lost 4 of our students. The loss of anyone diminishes us. Our school system is diminished by this loss. We have significant numbers of our staff members who have lost family and friends. Significant numbers of community members and neighbors who have also lost loved ones. In that loss and in the tragedy, what we have seen is a response that I believe that we can take pride in and be heartened by, as we've seen neighbor reach out to neighbor, as we've seen the hands come forward to say, what can I do for you? And we've certainly seen that not only in our community, but among our Buncombe County Schools family, and I'm very grateful for that and very appreciative of that. As we have been working over the course of the last 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, the storm arrived in Buncombe County. Prior to the storm's arrival, we had school bus drivers who were driving through floodwaters to pick up our neighbors on our school buses to take them to shelters from the storm. As the storm passed, our buses were back on the road, and from that moment till this, our teammates have continued to serve our community. Beyond our support for our emergency response personnel, beyond our support for our county leaders and our community leaders, fire departments across our county, one of our highest priorities was connecting and contacting our students and staff members. I can share with you this morning, and in fact, this number has changed as of the last 30 minutes. We've had direct contact with over 22,200 students at this point. We still have 21 students that we are continuing to search for, to get in contact with. We've had students who've left the area. We understand we've actually had students who've left the country. And so with the communication difficulties caused by the cell phone outage, that was quite complex to get in touch with our students. And I'm very grateful for the work of our teachers and administrators in finding our students with all the communication difficulties. And so we are well on our way to 100% of our students having been accounted for. We're very grateful for that. We're blessed to be able to say that we've had direct contact with 100% of our staff members as well. And so we appreciate the efforts to check on our friends and teammates, our students, and our neighbors. Today, this afternoon, I appreciate you gathering. We want to report to our Board of Education the work that we have been doing as a school system, share with you the work that we are doing to prepare for our students' return. As I've shared in the press brief with the county and in interviews that I've given, as this board is, we are absolutely determined to reopen our schools as quickly as possible. And so we want to share with you our efforts, our challenges, and our moving forward. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Ulmer, who's going to share with you in the area of community resource and communications.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Good afternoon, board members, BCS family, and guests here gathered with us today. Even though our students and teachers are not in schools right now, since the beginning of this storm, Buncombe County Schools and its team members have continued to be an invaluable community resource. As Dr. Jackson shared, our transportation team, using 12 BCS buses, were out helping get our friends and neighbors to safety and get them to shelters in the height of the storm as flood waters were quickly rising. We have had 3 BCS schools used as headquarters for out-of-area search and rescue organizations. Again, without any place for them to stay, but them working so many long hours, these groups and organizations have been able to turn to Buncombe County Schools as a place to rest their heads for a few hours before the next shift started. 7 of our Buncombe County schools have been used as sleeping quarters and spaces for portable showers and for utility crews, first responders, and law enforcement personnel who continue their important work all across Buncombe County and beyond. 4 Buncombe County school sites are being used by FEMA in some form or fashion. 2 Buncombe County school kitchens are being used to prepare meals for first responders and utility crews. And we are so blessed in Buncombe County to have great community and faith-based partners who have said, we have supplies, we just need the people to come to us and places to distribute them. And so 11 Buncombe County schools are used as those additional resource distribution sites from our community and faith-based partners, and we are so grateful for the help that they are providing to our community. 2 Buncombe County schools have been used as helipads for delivery of relief and medical supplies from far away. 2 of our schools are being used for emergency operations center equipment storage, and 3 of our schools have been used by Waste Pro for public trash collection as families continue to clean up after the devastation of this hurricane. We are so pleased that we have been able to be a good community steward, and when people have turned to Buncombe County Schools for help, we've been able to do that. We'd like to share with you our communication plans leading up to the storm. We began using our regular communication channels, and as we all know, we quickly had to make changes to be able to reach our BCS family and teammates. In the wake of the storm, after our leadership team consulted with local, state, and national emergency management personnel, the school schedule was changed. There was no school the Thursday leading up to the storm because of all the rains that had already started causing impacts in our area. And we used our regular channels of communication, our voice calls, emails, texts, the BCS app, and as we always do, we worked in conjunction with language services to make sure that all our families were getting those messages. We posted it on our BCS social media channels. We used our radio, TV, and digital news partners in town. But as you know, after the storm hit and cell phone service started faltering all across the county, we definitely had to pivot, and pivot we did. Getting out the old battery-powered radio or sitting in your driveway listening to your car radio was the only way for many people to get communication. There were some people who were not trapped by washed out bridges or down trees who were able to get downtown and get a faint cell signal trying to connect to a public Wi-Fi spot, but that was so unreliable, and when they could get a signal, the people they were trying to call, the loved ones and families they were trying to check on, weren't able to receive a call. We knew our families needed us, and so our communication strategy quickly pivoted. We turned to long-form radio interviews. We are very grateful to the iHeart Asheville Media Group here in Asheville and their radio stations that for so many in isolated areas were literally a lifeline, connecting people who needed resources with those who could provide them. Dr. Jackson has been there several times. In fact, he was just on early this morning, able to answer questions. In the beginning, it was, what are your schools doing? What resources are where? So that when people could get out, they knew which schools were a source of water, which schools were a source of meals ready to eat. As the days went on and the situation started to slowly improve, the hosts would ask questions. What will Buncombe County schools be doing to support students during this time and when students return? What can families be doing? What kind of activities for parents who wanted to ease the minds of their children, kind of give them a little bit of normalcy? Dr. Jackson was there to be a familiar voice to connect with the BCS family, to connect with the BCS teammates, and also to answer those questions and give helpful advice. Buncombe County Schools was able to provide statements and interviews to TV stations, and while even though people could not watch TV, iHeart Radio was simulcasting the audio from those newscasts from WLOS TV on the radio. We did long-form interviews with the stations of Asheville Radio Group. The daily Buncombe County government briefings, Dr. Jackson's been able to be featured on camera at several of those, which have also, in addition to being broadcast on the internet in a time when many people didn't have it, those have been broadcast on the radio. And on the days that there was too much information to get out about other topics, they were able to read statements from Buncombe County schools. So we've been able to pivot and continue using all of these channels, even as communication is improving, using all of these channels to get the message out to not only our BCS families and teammates, but also the community. And that's why the communications department from Buncombe County Schools had an emergency resource page ready to go, so that as communications continue to improve, we could link our families, our teammates, and our neighbors to all of those resources, and we are continuing to update that every day. You may be familiar with the FEMA assistance site that has just opened at A.C. Reynolds High School. We've added a tab on there on how not only our student families and our teammates, but how anyone in the community can prepare for a visit there and what documentations that they might need. We've also, because we know some people can get a web page to load, other people, they can get social media to load. It just depends on who your carrier is and where you are in Buncombe County. So we're pushing this information on social media as well. We want to be on as many channels as possible of communication. Quickly, almost as soon as the storm passed, we started hearing from out-of-area schools and student groups, how can we help? And working with Christy Cheek and our Buncombe County Schools Foundation, we've been able to communicate with those out-of-state and groups from across the country on what the needs are, communicating the needs and connecting those, offering help to Buncombe County. We continue to use all those communication channels that we have to regularly speak with our families and our BCS teammates. We know that this storm has impacted so many people in so many different ways, and that families and teammates have many different needs. And if we can push out some information that helps ease those worries about, oh my gosh, I've got all this going on, but I work for Buncombe County Schools and open enrollment is happening. Or, you know, there's so much going on. What about my son or daughter's college application? We are continuing to push information like that out because we want to be able to take one worry at a time that we can off the plates of our families and our teammates. And finally, I will share with you one of the best parts of the day as the recovery continues is seeing all the moments of hope that our teammates and our student groups and our families are sharing with us. And these moments of hope are all of the collective BCS family helping in the community, making a difference. And we will continue to share those as they are shared with us because together we rise as one Buncombe County family. Thank you very much. To share more information about learning activities, I'd like to bring out Associate Superintendent Dr. Jennifer Reed.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jackson, members of the board. I am excited to be able to share with you something that we'll be releasing this afternoon for our families. We know that our families are at different stages of recovery. We have some who are most in need of social and emotional learning and connection, and we have families who are ready to re-engage in learning and try to get their students back and kind of thinking about learning activities that they might be able to do together. And so today, we will actually be launching some learning activities for students that are completely optional. This is not like the remote learning that we have done in the past and the remote learning we do on weather days. These are optional activities for students and families to engage in. And I really want to emphasize the connect and the engage part of the learning resources that we will be putting out there this afternoon for our families. These optional, non-graded activities can be accessed by a phone or certainly by a computer. We know that internet and cellular access is still a problem for many of our families in Buncombe County, and so we have purposefully designed these to be easily accessed on a phone. They are divided by grade span, and they are specifically written by our incredible curriculum staff to make sure that they address state standards and things that were supposed to have been covered over the last few weeks that we'll be catching kids up on as soon as we get them in person with us, and we cannot wait for that day. But until then, these activities are designed, again, for families to engage in each other, for families to share with students, to help them to work through, and then a lot of these activities will be great for students to engage in together if our students do have that opportunity. These concepts are organized by content area and by skill, and generally they're just some really broad options for students and families to engage in reading, in writing, and thinking. Many of them very authentic tasks that relate to the experiences that they're currently in and have been in over the last few weeks. There's no more valuable and impactful type of learning than authentic learning, and so we want to share with families that that's just a great place to start. Is just to talk and think and write and read about experiences that they have had. We'll continue to add activities to this particular landing page, which will be on the page that Mr. Ulmer just shared with you with family resources throughout the coming days until we are able to reunite with our students in person, and we are excited to be able to do that. I've highlighted one activity there as an example. It's called 36 Fences. This would be a grade 3 through 5 activity where families could pick any object around the house, maybe a toothpick or something like that, and explore perimeter and area, which is one of the major concepts in 3rd through 5th grade and how they can actually physically figure out how large an area is. And so it's just activities like that where we've designed for families to engage in with their students, hands-on things. Today we'll also be sharing a plan with our principals. This plan we have named Reconnect, Renew, and Reengage. We want to be really intentional about reconnecting with our staff as we begin planning for the reopening of our school buildings. And so we'll provide this to principals so they can begin thinking about a staged reopening plan. And so the first stage of that plan would just be a simple way to reconnect with staff. This would be an information sharing session where principals would invite their staff in, share what information they know to make sure everybody's on the same page with where we are. Also to open it up with staff for questions and answers. And some of those answers will be able to be given by principals, and some of those answers they may not know, and they can kind of funnel through us here, and our district leadership team will answer those questions through a staff FAQ document that we'll also be sharing with our staff today. The second phase of that is just to renew a sense of belonging, renew a sense of community, and to have a purposeful time of gathering, whether that's to come together and do an art project, maybe it's come together and clean up and beautify your school grounds if that's something that needs to happen. Just something that would be meaningful to that staff so they can really work on the sense of belonging that they were already in the midst of developing really strongly before the hurricane hit our area. And then the last phase would be just to re-engage in the work. And our work is similar, but we know it's different. We know that the work now, as it always has been, but at a much deeper level, needs to center on the emotional needs of our staff so that they can be prepared to meet the social and emotional needs of our students. And so I want to lift that up because it's the most important part of what we're going to be doing. But if our own buckets aren't filled and the buckets of our staff aren't filled, we can't re-enter the school environment with our students whose buckets also need to be filled. So we're excited to launch that today. It gives us promise and hope for a new start and a renewed phase of school, and we cannot wait to see our staff and our students back in our schools.
So I am going to talk about some of that staff and student support that is much needed during this time and that began last week and will continue as we reopen schools and in the months after that. So as you already know, many of our teammates began working toward recovery even before Hurricane Helene made landfall. The efforts of our transportation team, maintenance staff, technology, and food and nutrition departments cannot be highlighted enough. They have worked long hours each day and witnessed firsthand the devastation left by Helene. Support for these initial responders was needed immediately and offered as soon as we were able to safely do so. A comfort room was opened and accessible each day for those who needed a quiet space or maybe needed someone to listen as they process unexpected emotions. As soon as phone lines and other means of communications were accessible, we began communicating with our staff members. As Dr. Jackson mentioned earlier, we are very blessed to say that we have now connected with 100% of our staff. But many of our staff have significant needs. They were substantially impacted by Hurricane Helene. And for those staff members, we have been working to connect them with the resources necessary to help them navigate their specific situation, or just someone to listen as they need to talk through. This has been a collaborative effort from our school-based administrators. I want to say thank you to our principals and our curriculum leadership team who really works tirelessly to make all those connections. We are also grateful for the outpouring of donations. We have received donations from across the state and across the country. I want to give a huge shout out to Christy Cheek and the Buncombe County Schools Foundation for their support during this time and their plans for ongoing support. Ms. Cheek has also been working almost around the clock to secure monetary donations through the foundation that are not only providing immediate support for our families, but will be available longer term once we've exhausted the physical donations coming in. We also began working immediately with our friend Sherry Lovray from the Crisis Management Institute. As you may remember, Ms. Lovray has partnered with Buncombe County Schools for over 15 years and was with us just last month with recovery response training with our administrators and our crisis response teams. And she actually went through response for all types of crisis. She has been instrumental as we plan for the return of staff, students, and families, and will actually be in Buncombe County next week to work alongside our team as we offer listening sessions for our student services teammates and also for our school administrators. Information from this visit will help guide the development of our staff and student resilience and social emotional recovery work. Upon return to school, we will lean on that relationship with Ms. Lovray, as well as our relationships with our community partners and our friends from across the state, other school districts who maybe weren't as impacted by Hurricane Helene, so that we are able to provide additional counseling support for staff and students. We're hoping to provide that support for staff to help process those emotions as they prepare to then support our students who are going to come in with their own trauma response. Simultaneously with connecting with staff, our student services team began working with school administrators and school-based teams to connect with students. It is unbelievable the work that our schools have done. They have been in communities they didn't even know where they were. They have been using Google Translate. They have been knocking on doors. They have been checking with neighbors. And as Dr. Jackson said earlier, we are now up to locating 22,192 of our students. And we will continue to work to find those 21 students who we think may have left town. But we're going to track them down, whatever we need to do to contact those students. And again, as you know, certain school families have experienced greater losses. These school families needed support last week and will continue to need an extra level of support as we re-enter school. We were able to provide some support to those families and staff members who were most closely connected with losses here last week and have additional support available for those school families as buildings reopen. We also continue to work with our community mental health partners to offer support for staff and students in need. Beginning next week, we hope to increase accessibility for students and staff in buildings where it's safe to do so. Our partners are eager to get back to work, and our students and our staff need them. I do want to share that there are resources available on our Buncombe County Schools website to assist parents as they are helping to support their students navigate this difficult time. And again, our partnership with the Crisis Management Institute and Ms. Lovray has been invaluable as we plan to welcome students back into our buildings. And we are designing empathy and resilience activities for our students, as well as other strategies to make their return to school as smooth as possible. And we will also have extra counselors available for students once they return to school. Thank you.
I very much appreciate the incredible dedication and expertise of our leadership team. The hours that they have put in the last 2 weeks can't be counted. The passion with which they have approached the work can't be measured. The love and care that they operate with is absolutely evident, and I'm so very grateful to have the opportunity to work with them. We know that our families are all in different places. Some are simply trying to take care of the bare necessities, and we're working with many partners, county and city government, with faith-based partners, with businesses and neighborhoods, trying to get provisions into the hands of our families who need those. We also have families who are a little further down the recovery road, and so having the learning activities, the optional learning activities available for them is how we're trying to differentiate our support based on the needs of our families with where our families are. One of the things that we recognize is that our students need to be in school. And as Mr. Ulmer said very clearly, we had the opportunity, and we appreciate our radio partners for the opportunity to connect with our family through that medium. He said, our students need to be in school. We need our students. And that's absolutely true. We need our students to be in school. And so we've been working tirelessly to make sure that as soon as we were able to, we would be able to get our schools open. And so I'd like to pivot to share with you our work around reopening our school and the reopening considerations. And so as an opportunity to set the context, as of today, 44 of our 45 schools have power. The 45th school, Barnardsville Elementary School, has power available. However, we're keeping it turned off until the building's ready to accept that power. So we do have power available to all 45 campuses. 44 currently have power on campus. Only 13 of our 45 schools have water. I'll pause there to share with you that in my 33 plus years, if a school didn't have water, we sent students home. We closed school. We couldn't imagine operating schools without water. Water is crucial to the operation of a building, not just for things like being able to flush commodes or wash our hands, but also for things like feeding our students. Our school system is so proud to offer free breakfast and lunch to all of our students, which means that each day our child nutrition staff is preparing 44,000 meals. It takes a lot of water to prepare 44,000 meals and then clean up afterwards. The water also provides our fire sprinkler systems in our buildings. It provides the cooling in the cooling towers for our HVAC systems and is a part of our air handling units. And so water is a crucial, critical part of our building operations. We understand that the timeline for water to be restored across our county, we appreciate all of the work of the City of Asheville water system and all the partners who've come in to help them with that work. But the timeline, we haven't been given a date as they continue to do that work, but we can't wait for water to come back. And so we were challenged by our Board of Education and by our community to get our schools open as soon as possible. And being educators, we don't believe anything's impossible. We believe that if you work hard, you make good choices, and you do your best, you can accomplish the impossible. That's what we tell our students. If you work hard, if you make good choices, if you do your best, you can achieve your dreams. And so we've taken on the task of what I thought might have been impossible in the past. We also have 39 schools at this time that have internet connectivity. Our technology team has worked throughout the last 2 weeks so that as soon as power came on in a building, the internet was restored. Many of our building systems depend on the internet, things like our door access controls to be able to get in and out using our name tags, things like our phone system, so that internet is crucial. We get it up, and then the fiber cables were being cut by the folks who were here to restore power. Now, we're not complaining because we need power for our neighbors, but we would have to go back and repair the fiber lines. And so it feels like we've taken 2 steps forward and 1 back and 2 forward, but that's okay. Our team didn't complain once. They kept grinding, and so I'm very happy that we're at 39 schools with internet connectivity. Now, if we don't have internet connectivity in 45 schools, we can still open. We can work without the internet if we have to, and we've worked hard to understand what that would mean for our schools. Our goal, though, is that all 45 of our schools have internet connectivity, and I believe in our team and believe that will happen. As we've considered reopening, I've spent a lot of time meeting with local, state, and national leaders. I've been in the Emergency Operations Center since Friday after the storm, working with our leaders across the county, initially on disaster response and the school system support of emergency responders, from things like filling gas in fire trucks and police cars and ambulances, to taking care of logistical concerns for our emergency personnel. We've been honored to do that. As we've begun to pivot into plans for reopening our schools, I had the opportunity along with my colleague, Dr. Maggie Furman, the superintendent for Asheville City Schools, to meet with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to ask for reopening guidelines post-Hurricane Helene, to understand what the environmental specialists would say we need to make sure we've done so that we can open our schools without water. Again, something that is not typical, and prior to this I would have said was impossible, but we believe we can do it. However, we know, and I've shared many times when we were talking about graduation, the sacred trust that parents put in our school system when they bring their children to school. And we also often think of that as a physical safety. Well, physical safety is also health and hygiene, making sure that our schools are healthy places, and we've done everything we can to make sure when our children and staff members are in our buildings that they're safe. And so I very much appreciate our state partners. They've recently sent us those school reopening guidance documents. So I've shared that with our team. It's essentially what I've called a go, no-go document. So green light, red light, and we're working through every step on that, and we will have all green lights before we reopen our schools so that we can say to our parents and community, our schools are safe to reopen. We've had the opportunity to work with the fire marshal throughout the disaster response, and now as we're working through reopening the schools. I mentioned the importance of water in terms of our fire sprinkler systems. To operate a building without a fire sprinkler system, we have to have a Buncombe County Schools employee who has no other duty in the moment than to be on fire watch. So for us to be in this building meeting right now, Mr. Joe Huff is standing over there in the doorway. I happen to see him. He is our fire watch today. He's not allowed to do anything but watch for fires. When we open our schools without water, we have to have staff that are exclusively devoted to that fire watch duty. And so working with our human resources staff, we are going to reach out to our substitute teacher pool to hire our substitute teachers to serve as our fire watch, so we will be able to meet those needs and ensure our buildings are safe. We've also been working with North Carolina Department of Transportation. Our transportation team, beyond driving buses, and in fact, we just got, just yesterday, we continue to run buses for shelter services to take folks who are living in the shelters to medical appointments. We had the honor of transporting, I believe, 38 veterans from the shelter to their new residence that was set up by the Veterans Assistance Program. And so we're honored to transport our veterans who have been living in the shelters at the request of the county. But in addition to doing that work, our transportation team has been remapping our county. We have a list of roads that are no longer safe or are not currently safe for our buses to travel on. Our measure of safety for our buses is that a bus can safely travel on that road without leaving its lane. So it doesn't have to swerve around road that might have been eaten away or doesn't have a tree in the way. Two buses should be able to pass each other on a two-lane road for us to believe that we can safely operate our buses. And so when we can't travel on a bus route, we have to redo the bus route, which means that we will have a great need around communications, and Mr. Ulmer and I have been working on that to make sure that when those bus routes are put in place, that we do a good job sharing with parents and community members, well, with parents, that when the bus will arrive. Now, I am very appreciative of our school system's forward work previously to implement the Edgelog app on smartphones, which tell parents when the bus is coming. That may be more important than it ever has been because the buses are going to be driving new routes. Our bus drivers will be driving new routes. And as everyone who lives in Buncombe County knows, our roads are still changing. We have roads that are okay today and maybe not okay tomorrow, and so we're having to constantly change that. We've been working with the North Carolina Department of Transportation to ensure that we understand and have all the roads that we've identified that are not safe for our buses, and we understand the timeline on getting those roads taken care of. And so all of that work we've been going forward and going through and continuing to go through so that we can reopen our schools safely. The biggest piece of all of this, though, is the water. I've referenced it a few times. It is what I'm losing sleep over right now in terms of trying to figure out how to do the impossible. And again, I believe we will do it. So currently, we have 32 schools without water. That represents 14,680 of our students. There have been questions about, well, do you open schools that have water and not the schools that don't have water? I can't imagine saying to 14,000 students, I'm sorry you can't go to school yet while others go, because we know that every single one of our students matters and is worthy of our greatest efforts, and so we want to make sure that all of our schools open. Mr. Wyatt and his team, using our building code, and particularly the plumbing code, as our opportunity to understand the needs, have determined that among those 32 schools, we need daily 140,000 gallons of non-potable water to take care of all of those uses for non-potable water. Our entire community, I think, now knows the difference between potable and non-potable. May not have known that 2.5 weeks ago, but we know now. 140,000 gallons. Daily, we need 41,000 gallons of potable water. Now note that this is for all 45 schools because most of our water systems are still under a boil advisory, so we cannot use that water for cooking or washing hands. We have to use potable water for our hand washing, hand hygiene. And so 181,000 gallons of water is needed in our school system, primarily for those 32 schools, other than the potable water for the other 13 that have water currently. That breaks down to a need for 939 toilets and 391 hand washing stations in order to open our schools. We've pivoted through lots of scenarios of what does that look like. Does that look like 939 porta-johns and 391 standalone hand stations? We've tried to resource those. As you know, they're at a premium, particularly with the Hurricane Milton that just went through Florida, also drawing resources. Ultimately, as we worked through all of the scenarios, we started with what we've called a flush brigade. The flush brigade is what we use on a typical day. If water goes out in one school, we send our maintenance department with bottles of water and non-potable water, and we can get through enough time to get meals served to our students if that hasn't happened in the day, and get them on a bus. So it's a very quick turnaround in terms of how long they're in the school. In order to operate our schools, though, without water, we calculate that that would be at a minimum 1,780 volunteers a day who would show up to help us flush the commodes, carrying the water up and down the hallways from the tank that would be in front of the school. Now I'll note, and I don't want to get graphic, but I'll note in our school system, unlike most commodes at home, we don't have a tank on the back of the toilet. It's just a pipe that comes right to the toilet. So when you're flushing a school system commode, you're pouring water on what's in the toilet. That is not pleasant work, and so to think about 1,780 folks showing up day after day, week after week, consistently to do that work is just not sustainable. And so as we worked through that, we recognized that what felt like the best solution, and the solution we presented, was the need for restroom trailers. We calculated that at about 240 restroom trailers, depending on how many restrooms or commodes were in the trailer. And we've made that request through the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, which is now staffed by FEMA, for those restroom trailers, and we've asked for that to be expedited. We've reached out to state and national elected leaders to ask for them to lend their support to our request to try to make that happen as soon as possible. And so we continue to follow that strategy and to do all we can to bring that to fruition. While working on that, a donor heard the press conference that was done at the county level when I presented this need in our plan, and came to the EOC, to FEMA, and said, we have put our engineers on it, and here's what we would like to propose. We'd like to propose placing 5,000 gallon tanks outside each school that needs water. The tank with a pump, which we would provide, the tank and the pump at no cost, would then be connected to the water line that supplies the school with a T-valve, so that you would use the water from the tank until the water system was restored, and then you turn the valve and you're able to go back to the water system. We are currently pursuing that and working hard to make sure that that is a viable solution. We do believe that it is, and so right now we're working on both of those scenarios to get to what gets us open quicker. We believe it's going to be the 5,000-gallon tanks. I have worked with our board attorney to ensure that we were taking all of the proper steps in that. And we certainly appreciate that donor, and we'll keep the board updated as we move forward with that process. The last 2 nights I've had meetings that start at 7:15 p.m. for some reason. I guess that's the time that works. And we'll keep having those daily meetings and I guess nightly meetings to move forward on that process. Again, because we want to reopen our schools as soon as we can, as safely as we can. We've also been working on strategies like sharing our campuses, a strategy where we have 13 schools with water. Perhaps we open the school day 1 for the host school, day 2 for another school to come in, day 3 for another school to come in, and then on the 3rd day, the host school would be back in session. We are working on strategies around shortened days. And so we are trying to work through multiple scenarios at the same time, doing our best to get our schools open as quickly as possible. We believe the 5,000-gallon tank strategy is the one that's most likely to come to fruition and to do it the quickest. We may have to use some sort of shared strategy there where we may use the 5,000-gallon tanks along with shared campuses. Perhaps a shortened day where we could have 2 schools on the same campus, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. But we will do whatever it takes. We'll be as flexible as required, as innovative as possible to get our students back in school. And so as we consider our next steps as we move forward to getting back in school, we know that what we have before us is a requirement for excellent communication. We'll continue to do our very best and to ramp up our efforts to communicate with parents. We recognize that we have families who have left town temporarily because they needed to go to other places, or perhaps they're staying with family members outside of Buncombe County, and so we've got to do a good job around communicating when we're going to reopen so they have the opportunity to come back home so they're here as we reopen. We're doing our best to communicate with those families out of town and to communicate with our families who are right here. We also want to make sure we're doing our best to communicate all of the resources that are available to our families. Mr. Almer referenced this FEMA information that we just received, and as soon as we received it, we turned it around through all of our channels because we know that our families need that information. We'll continue to do that. Our ongoing work, of course, as it always is to continue our partnerships. The partnerships with the county and emergency response personnel, where we're providing logistical help. We look forward to getting out of that business, but it's almost like a bell curve in terms of we are gradually getting out of that business as others pick up that work because we wouldn't want any degradation of services. We also have the partnerships with the resource provisions. We have one faith-based group that's bringing in 1,000 volunteers from out of Buncombe County who are going to be camping on one of our campuses this weekend, and they're here to cut trees and take care of people's homes. And so we are proud to and honored to be able to offer our campus as a place for these 1,000 volunteers from out of town to camp while they're here working over the weekend. And so we'll continue those partnerships. We'll do our very best to be excellent in communication through all the many medium that we've been taking advantage of. This year, our school year started on the campus of A.C. Reynolds High School, where we brought together for the first time in decades perhaps every single one of our staff members. And we talked about our theme of Together We Rise. And we talked about what that meant. I don't know that we could have imagined that we would have so great an understanding of that as we do today, because we recognize and have seen over the course of the last 2 weeks that even in the greatest tragedy, when we come together as a Buncombe County Schools family, when we come together as family and neighbors across Buncombe County, regardless of the circumstances, when we're together, we know we rise. Madam Chair, this concludes our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions the board members may have.
Thank you very much. So this is awesome. We just have to take a second and appreciate what all's been done and your ability to put that together in a document that we can understand and appreciate what all's been happening. And we thank all of you So at this time, I would ask if board members have questions for Dr. Jackson.
So, of course I do. Thank you.
Of course.
Of course I do. Dr. Jackson, I also want to reiterate what Madam Chair just said. There's been a lot of work done. I've talked to you almost daily, and I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate Jeremy Stowe and his team. I just can't get over the things that you all have done, not just for the school system, but for this whole entire community. And I get emotional, and I'm glad to see I have a sister over here and Jennifer that gets emotional, but the child nutrition team, our maintenance team, y'all have done so much work, and you could have sat at home and got paid for it, but you chose to help. And I want to recognize each one of you and your team for doing that. So my question, and I do have several, but I'll limit.
I
let
would
others talk.
appreciate a little limit.
I'll limit a few, but I've got a whole list. So I get what we've done in terms of investigating options for us. But are we not going to make a recommendation of when we can get our schools open, and what does that look like? When does that look like, which is what people are asking me, and then, of course, getting them open. There's some other questions that I'll ask at a different time, but the next steps, excellent communication, and communication is very important to me, and I do want to know what's going on. And you know that, because I owe it to the people that I work for in my community. But I want to know, what are our real next steps? Are we going to try to set a date of when we can get our kids back in school? Because I think that's what people want to hear. It's great for us to know what's been done, and a lot has been done, a lot. But I also want to know, what is your recommendation on getting these kids back in our schools?
Thank you. So I would like our students to be in school today. I'd like to be able to say we're opening schools on Monday. I can't say that we're opening schools on Monday because we don't have our water needs met. What I'm afraid of setting a date is that if we're able to open our schools next Wednesday, I'd like to be able to do that and not set a date that's too far down the road and have to wait for that date, because we understand, because families have left town, if we set a date, people start planning for that date. We have a lot of moving parts, whether it's restroom trailers arriving from all over the place as they're sourced, or these 5,000-gallon tanks actually arriving and being installed at our schools. We are going to work as quickly through that as possible. The faster we get it done, the quicker we can open. And so I'm afraid to set a date. The board can certainly do that if that's the will of the board. I'm afraid to recommend to set a date because we want to do it as quickly as we possibly can. I don't want to promise a date and not be able to meet that deadline. I also don't want to set a date too far out and then actually be able to beat that deadline. And so it's my recommendation that we continue to update our parents regularly on our progress, which is what we've been trying to do throughout this week, to say these are the challenges, and this is what we're doing to address the challenge, and this is where we are.
So in terms of the trailers, which those are nice restrooms, I've used them a lot, and they're very nice, very clean. So for anyone that's concerned about that, it's not the regular porta-johns that I can't stand the smell. So kids would be taken care of from that, and then I get the bag lunch, the breakfast, we can do all that. But I just, in the research that's been done, or the resources you've reached out to, have they given you any kind of estimate of, and tell me again how many trailers that we would need?
Approximately 240.
240.
That number could change based on how many restrooms are actually in each trailer. And so
Okay, yeah.
we've reached out to the state for help in identifying those trailers, because you have the hurricane in Florida. Resources are being pulled in lots of directions. And so they're having to pull them from where they can find them. And so those trailers may have different numbers. So 240 is an approximate number.
And can they not give you, it'll take us 10 days, or it'll take us 2 weeks?
They really can't, because they're trying to find them, and so once they're found, they have to be brought and set up, and so there's just not, as much as I would love to say, I know that it's going to take 10 days, as much of a planner as I am, we just don't have that information at this time.
Okay. Just a couple other quick things on hygiene. And I've been talking to a lot of parents. Y'all know I'm in my schools, and I get calls a lot. One of the concerns, just a concern that was thrown out, was from several parents was, okay, we send kids back to school, we give them the trailers and the water to drink and all of that. What about the student that doesn't have a place to go to take a shower? And what kind of pressure does that put on kids? Is there a risk of more illness? I had someone ask me about, the flu, lice in their hair, in kids' hair. What does that, I have my own personal thoughts on that, but, have we considered that as part of the reason that we're not saying, our goal is to open October 28th or whatever?
So FEMA is opening what they're referring to as comfort stations,
Okay.
which are places where community members can come to take a shower or wash clothes, etc. And so those will be available in the community. And once we get that information from FEMA that they're up and ready, we'll be sharing that with the entire community, or helping to broadcast that information. We have not requested showers as part of our restroom trailers, primarily because we want to make it as easy as possible to get them as quickly as possible. But we are going to make sure that as FEMA gets those set up and as resources are available, that just like with the food and water provisions, that we share that information with our community.
Okay, I have a question. Let's change from talking about trailers and talking about these, I forget what you call them, these tanks or
Yes,
whatever.
ma'am.
Tanks.
Water tanks
Water tanks.
that have been offered free of charge for us and for setup. And I'd like to hear some about that. I think that's a really good idea.
Absolutely. So the 5,000 gallon tanks would be set up next to our buildings. The tanks ideally would be sourced with potable water, which would allow us to do all the things we need to do, wash our hands and cook, etc. However, if potable water is not available in that quantity, because we would need to set up a tanker system that would refill our tanks, and we've worked with the county. Today I had a conversation with a superintendent who has a non-potable water tank in his district because they have some water system issues, and he's offered to loan that to Buncombe County Schools as long as we need it. So we'll set up a distribution to refill those tanks. We'd love to be able to fill them with potable water, but if we can't, we fill them with non-potable water, so at least we can do the flushing. That work, they are hoping to start that work, Mr. Wyatt, on.
They're evaluating the campuses as we speak.
So they're here.
I didn't hear what he said.
He said they're evaluating our campuses for that work as we speak.
Uh-huh.
And as I've met with them, they felt like they would have a very quick turnaround, approximately 2 days to get started, and they believe they could install 4 schools a day. Now, working through FEMA, that donor has made that offer to Buncombe County Schools, Asheville City Schools, and the 7 charter schools in the county. And so they're trying to offer it to all of our schools, recognizing children need to be in school. And so that process is underway.
Thank you. I'll tell people in the room that I was on US 70 this morning, and I saw one of those tanks. It's at the Best Western, if you want to drive by. It's on the Best Western just as you get on 70. Well, I was going the wrong direction, so I had to make a little U-turn so I could come around and take a picture. And that Best Western has 2 tankers. I guess you call them tankers, do you?
Tanks.
Just tanks. 2 tanks set up, and the plumbing is already there. It's not very, I mean, you had to know what you're looking for to see it. So, you know, I kind of like that. I kind of like it that it could set on our campuses and not be obtrusive. We could have access to it currently, and then maybe as we recover from this, we could have that for other uses. There's always a use for water.
That's exactly right.
So they've given you a kind of a time frame. You said 4 schools a day.
4 schools a day, and they believe they can get started in 2 days. They ask us to set the priority for where we would put the tanks. I mentioned we have 32 schools without water. We've heard from the Asheville water system that water will start to come on closest to Black Mountain. In fact, yesterday, the city of Black Mountain sent out a text. I got an alert that scared me to death when it went off, that said that they were connecting to the Asheville City Water Authority, and the water may be discolored, but it would be usable for flushing. Please don't drink it, etc. And so the water system folks have said they will start Black Mountain and work across the county. The last place to receive water will be the Inca Candler area. And so with the tanks, we've asked that they prioritize the Inca Candler area and work towards the water system. Operating in the background that we've not really mentioned is the water system, which is trying to get our water system back operational as soon as possible. And so I appreciate the updates, the videos and pictures they've been sharing as they do that work. And of course, they've got a lot of folks partnering with them to get that work done. And so we're very hopeful that that water system will be online sooner rather than later. Certainly hoping for that in my house.
So, mine too. I think we're next to last. So, I like that idea too.
Okay, let's give some other people opportunity
Okay.
to talk, okay?
For a minute, Renee.
Did somebody else have an have a question?
Okay. Sure. May I go?
I'm not surprised.
I'll raise my hand.
Seems to be the bookends. Sorry? Seems to be the bookends.
Sure. Well, first, thank you very much, and to your team, and all the staff that's here. I've been out in the community, at schools, here a little bit, and on the phone with you at 8 o'clock at night sometimes. So, I mean, I know that y'all have just been working so tirelessly and must be exhausted. So I hope that you're taking care of yourselves too amidst all of this. And you're working diligently to figure out the safest and most respectful way to re-engage students at our schools. And I can't stress that thanks enough. It's from all of our community. As a community representative, that's what I hear all the time is thank you for everything that you've done so far, staging places for first responders, et cetera. So I had a couple of questions. One, is there an update on the education bills that went through the General Assembly Wednesday? I know there was some examples sent around. Were all those passed, and what impact will they have on us in this reopening, if any, and do we need to have a policy committee meeting to potentially shift our policies to address some of that legislation that came through?
Please.
Some good questions, and I do know that on Thursday that the General Assembly passed the Disaster Recovery Act of 2024. This is the primary bill that I'm aware of passed. I'll double check to make sure anything else hasn't. This bill obviously covers a lot of different areas outside of school, just general disaster recovery. It does provide us some additional flexibility in the area of calendar and staff pay. And so basically it provides school systems that are in a county that were marked as a state of emergency that we can either, in regards to calendar, make up any number of instructional days or equivalent hours, or deem those days as completed, whether we make them up or not, up to a total of 20. So you all will be able to mark 20 missed days, up to 20 missed days as completed towards your 108 or towards your hour or day requirement, if that makes sense. You can also have some additional remote learning days. If you remember, your remote learning days are limited under current law, and so you can use up to 30 remote instructional days or 180 remote instructional hours this school year. So we might need to use some of that in the future if we have some additional snow days or something maybe as well. In regards to employment compensation, it allows you to pay employees who were not able to work because of Helene and were, while school was closed. So you can pay employees without any issues, any legal issues with paying them. The other kind of maybe flexibility issue for schools in this budget, or excuse me, in the disaster relief bill, is it also allows you to bring back retirees who retired in the last 6 months without them having to sit out the 6-month waiting period. I think most of you probably know that if you retire from the school system or any state agency, you can go back and work part-time, but you can only do that after sitting out 6 months, and then you have a salary cap too. This allows people who have retired within the last 6 months to come back so long as they are coming back in a position that is required due to the emergency of the situation. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility too if we need to bring in some counselors or anybody else who retired that would like to come back in as well, just to help out through the kind of emergency phase of this. So those were the primary issues that were impacting schools. I know there were some other additional bills. I'm going to double check. And Dr. Jackson, I don't know if you know of anything else.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And so we don't need any policy adjustments to like take advantage of those. If we decide to leverage any of those capabilities from that legislation, that would be a board level decision.
Correct.
Okay, at the
Correct.
board meeting or something.
Yeah, I definitely think you all are in the aftermath of this are going to have to figure out the school calendar and how you will adapt to this flexibility and what you will use, what you will make up and what you will deem as completed.
Okay.
So.
Thanks. Just two more things. One, I just want to say too that school systems aren't machines. School systems are people. And we just mentioned all the people that are tirelessly working right now. But as we talk about returning to school, we're very focused on students, as we should be. But also just want to highlight our staff as well, that they are part of the school system that is all returning to work. And so as we're trying to meet their needs as well, because I know several that have lost their homes, their spouse's business has washed away, or it goes on and on. We've talked about a minimum 72-hour notice. In that type of time frame, when we do get to a point where we're talking about a date, because we will be there at some point, are there like teacher work days included in that 72-hour notice, or would that be additional? How are we even thinking about that concept of sort of the staggered re-entry of staff and students a little bit differently?
Yes, sir. So thank you, and I appreciate you mentioning and highlighting the needs of our staff. One of the things that our principals have done a great job is in collecting those needs. And in talking with all of our staff members, we have a list of the needs that have been identified, whether that's a loss of a home, a loss of a vehicle, damage to a home, a place to stay, a loss of a family member or friend. We've tried to capture all of that information. And working through our Human Resources Department, we've already begun to address those needs as community partners have reached out. And so we've already heard some wonderful stories of being able to help staff members, and we'll continue to do that throughout because it is incredibly important to us that we take care of our BCS family. In terms of the calendar, and I appreciate the mention of the need to address the calendar, we've actually already started looking at that. We monitor that very closely, and so at the appropriate time, we'll come back to the Board of Education to suggest that these are the changes we may want to look at in the school calendar. For example, we may want to push the end of the first semester back a little bit so that our 2 semesters are a little closer to balance, because students in this first semester, primarily a high school issue, have lost some time in a semester that's been disjointed, to say the least, and so we may want to address that. One of the things we probably don't want to address is Election Day. So Election Day is coming up. Many of our schools are polling places. This is a presidential election year, and so the Board of Education has that as a teacher work day. And so I would suggest that it needs to continue to be a teacher work day, because we'll have so many people on so many of our campuses, and we need to have this space for elections to go seamlessly on campus and not have some sort of student voter interaction that might cause some sort of issue that we wouldn't want. And so that's a teacher work day that we would suggest, but we'll bring back the school calendar for the board to take a look at and share with us how you'd like to move forward on that. In terms of work days coming back, Dr. Johnson and her team have worked really hard on staff support and student support. And we've talked about, before we bring back the students, we need at least one day with our staff in the building. Some schools, it'll be more than one day as our staff return, and so not necessarily more than one formal work day, but we have a few classrooms, for example, where we had to take the carpet up because there was some flooding, and so there'll need to be some work to reset the classroom. But beyond the physical needs of the building or the physical needs of setting up a classroom or even planning for lessons, our staff, just like the rest of our community, have encountered great trauma in their own lives. And they need to have the opportunity to be with each other. We plan for counselors and social workers from outside of our school system is the plan to be available for our staff members. So if they would like to speak to somebody, they can. We certainly have our counselors and social workers, but our counselors and social workers have also gone through trauma, and so we recognize that as well. And so there'll be a need for our staff to come together for at least a day. So we imagine a teacher work day prior to returning to our students coming back, so that our staff are in a good place to welcome our students back. And then in our student support plan, we have the same thing in place with counselors and school social workers from across the state who are coming in to help us out. So to answer your question, yes, it is our intention, our plan to have a teacher work day before we come back to school for our students. In terms of the 72 hours, we have announced that as a minimum of 72 hours, so we would like to give as much notice as possible. So as soon as we know we can come back, we will let our community and our staff members know. One pertinent example of that is we have a school counselor who relocated to the Raleigh-Durham area and recognized that we have multiple students from Buncombe County Schools who relocated to the Raleigh-Durham area, and he's actually hosting an event, a free event for any of our Buncombe County School students in the Raleigh-Durham area in Raleigh-Durham, so they have an opportunity to get together. And so in that, we recognize we have staff members who also have to travel back home and make sure they're ready to go back to work. So we're going to do our very best to communicate in a timely manner for our students and families, but also for our staff, so they have the opportunity to be prepared to come back. And in our communication with our staff, we are working to understand who is able to come back and who may not be able to come back. And so because when our students come back, if a teacher's not there, we need a substitute teacher in place. And so we're going to do what it takes to open or reopen our schools the right way. I've shared with our staff, we only get one chance to reopen, and so we want to make sure we do it well, because that's what our community expects from our school system.
Thank you. I have one or two more, but I can share the.
Okay, someone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
A couple of them, actually. Actually, I'm checking off quite a bit, so thank you.
Speak into the
With regards to the law now allowing us to forego that 6-month waiting period and bringing back in retired people, one thing that I have noticed on social media is the outpouring from teachers all over the state, most of them retirees, who wanted to know if there was opportunities to come in and give support to our schools to allow our teachers, if they needed additional time once schools were open, to go and do things, because as we know, this is going to definitely be a marathon. Is that something that we can look at, taking a statewide, as long as they were licensed in North Carolina? So like, say there's a group of teachers in Greensboro that recently retired or wanted to come down and provide a couple of days here and there. Is that something you think that could be feasible?
Sure. So a couple of things there. This year, one of the things we were quite proud of was our hire rate. We were almost completely hired, and I believe we still are. In terms of, we had very few vacancies this year. We're quite proud of that. And so as we have vacancies, what that law allows is that someone who may have retired early September could come back now because a month has passed, which would help us fill any positions that we had. In terms of utilizing recently retired or even current employees in a volunteer capacity, we're very much in favor of that. And as we continue to build out our student support and our staff support, as there are opportunities there for experienced staff, we'd certainly reach out. I mentioned to that point the availability of counselors and school social workers. So I reached out to all of the superintendents in the 115 school systems across the state and said that when we come back to school, typically if we've had a traumatic event in one school, our counselors and social workers from across our school system go to that school to provide support for a day or two. In this case, we've had trauma in all 45 of our schools. And so I reached out to superintendents to say, hey, would you let us borrow a school social worker and a school counselor to come here, camp out our central services if that's what it takes, and be available to be in our schools for that first day or so. The response has been overwhelming, and so that's a part of our work. But utilizing currently serving school counselors and social workers from across the state, we know they're trained and they're capable and they work with young people on a regular basis, and so we can have some confidence for who's talking to our students. Retirees would fall into that boat as well, and so as we have needs and they reach out either as a volunteer or for a vacancy, we now have more flexibility in hiring.
That's great to hear. The only other thing that I was going to ask too was the 16 schools that have water, there's no chance that those are, like there's some in each district, is there? We couldn't be that lucky, could we?
No, ma'am. So
No,
it's
those are-
13 schools with water. They're
13, sorry.
primarily in the Robertson District and the North Buncombe District. And so the Robertson District, Nashville City water flowing from Mills River is available. In the North Buncombe District, we have the Weaverville and Woodfin water that comes in that direction. And so schools there have water. And then we have two small elementary schools that have wells, Barnardsville and Lester Elementary. And so with the exception of Lester Elementary, all the schools with water are located at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock at North Buncombe and T.C. Robertson.
Okay. And the reason that I've asked is, of course, often like with snow days, you get well, we're not having any snow on our end of town. Why is it that the whole district has to shut down? And we know those reasons. But again, just in trying to offer up opportunities, the schools that do have water, is there an option to, until, let's just say this is going to take 2 to 3 weeks, could we, on a volunteer basis, have some tutoring opportunities within those schools, similar to our homework diners, with perhaps not the dining if we couldn't manage that? But I know a lot of teachers that are, they're actually going on social media and saying, that they want to try to get a pod together with, helping to keep kids caught up, which I think is great. But then, of course, there's all these logistics and policies and all the things that go along with that. So if there was any way that we could at least offer the tutoring opportunities that anybody could bring their kids in regardless of where they went, or could we even provide some transportation?
So those are all things that we've been looking at and considering as we pivoted from kind of emergency services support to planning for reopening. So to that point, next week we have a college application support time that's actually going to be co-located, one at Valley Springs Middle School where we do have water and power, and the other here at Nesbitt Discovery Academy. And so 2 different places in the county for seniors who are applying to college and who are worried. We have reached out to CFNC, the College Foundation of North Carolina, and to the Common App to ensure that there were some deadline waivers that would be put in place for our students, and that is in place. But we also know parents are very concerned about those application deadlines, and so Dr. Johnson and her team have put together, working with Dr. Reed and her team, some opportunities for parents and students to come in and work on those things. And so tutoring opportunities, we've started beefing out the resource piece. Certainly we'll continue to work towards that. A lot of the concerns we've talked about with all the schools, or the schools without water, apply to the schools with water as well. So currently, it's non-potable. We also have, as we look at that opportunity, staff members who are not here. Many of our staff members who are still here are volunteering in lots of community organizations. And then, as I mentioned, just about all 45 of our schools are currently hosting large groups who are helping our community. And so part of our reopening plan also has to be an opportunity to, I don't say reclaim, but to have again our schools and our school campuses. Duke Power, for example, has almost the entirety of the North Buncombe High School campus as their headquarters where they're sleeping and doing their things. They also have Owen Middle School as a laydown yard for all the new power poles, and so multiple schools have things, and some of those schools where they're using are schools that also have power and water. So absolutely, that's something that we can do in terms of offering things to the entire community.
And I do appreciate the online opportunities that we're going to be putting out there for parents also. I think step in the right direction.
Yes, ma'am.
And very excited to hear about the ginormous water tanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, someone else?
Dr. Jackson, I would just like to echo my thanks to all of Buncombe County School staff, particularly the maintenance, the child nutrition, and the folks who have come on board this week to work, our transportation department and the buses and all that. I know you hear it probably every day, thank you so much. But hearing the four of you speak today, you each referenced hope. And to me, these gallons of water and the way that they're being offered to us free of charge is not just a glimmer of hope. To me, it's a ray of hope and something that we need to clasp and be glad that we have it and grateful for it. I don't know if you need a motion for that, but I would like to say that I am in favor of it as well as these other folks who have spoken, and I appreciate from whichever source it may be coming, I'm so glad that we have that opportunity to speed up the process of getting our children back in school where they need to be and where we want them to be, and our teachers and our principals and people that we miss and we love. I've been around this system for 50 years now. I hate to say in a way, but I'm also proud to say that I'm part of a community that is so loving and so supportive and so caring of our children and our people. So thanks to all of you for all you've done, and whatever we can do as a board to support that, please knock on our doors and give us a call and let us know what we can do. Thank you.
I'll just say this really quickly. I think probably one of the biggest honors of my life has been to observe this team in the last 2 weeks. And it's really quite incredible. You all are incredible, and I am honored to serve with you and beside you and to observe firsthand what this team does and is capable of doing. And for that, Dr. Jackson, for your leadership and for your team, you are all to be commended.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to congratulate the technology department because, I mean, not to take away from anyone else, but all of you know that I'm technology challenged. And to be without it has been a blessing. And so I have, nobody could get me, I could get nobody. That is still the case at my house. And I am here to tell you that surviving without it is peaceful. But I will come up to the plate when it's necessary that I do that. And when that ability returns to my house, I'll be nice. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I echo everything that Judy, Glenn said, and as well. So can you expand just a minute on the guidance that you received from DPI and HHS? It sounds like they're red light, green light, which I would think of as benchmarks. And I know that we're not comfortable talking about timelines, but I know from our last natural disasters that we had to navigate through several years ago, that was something that the board helped. It helped the public, our families, and everyone understand, like, there might not be hard dates attached to those benchmarks, red light, green light, have we passed that gate or not, but at least we know that they're there, and we can see if they're red or green. Is there any way that we can provide some kind of benchmark approach for our families to say, like, here's the 20 things that DEI and HHS said that we have to have, and we're 60% of the way. You give a good ladder analogy the other day about it, but like, we've crossed these steps and we've got these 5 left, and just to provide some sense of understanding of where we are in checking those things off.
Absolutely, I think that's a very good idea and easily done. So the document that I referenced, we just saw it in draft form. I believe it came yesterday. I shared it with our attorney as well. It's supposed to be in final form today. And as soon as I receive that, what we can certainly do is go through and create a report with our communication staff, much as we did during that time I don't like to remember very fondly, but a dashboard so our community knows that perhaps we're at 32 of 45 schools have met this metric, or 23 of 45, or 44 of 45, whatever it is, so that the community is able to, quote unquote, keep score and see how close we're getting. So I think that's pretty easily done. And so as soon as we get that final document, it's supposed to be here today, we can absolutely do that.
Do those thresholds apply differently for in-school instruction versus extracurriculars? Because that's a lot of the concern right now in the community. For those, like you said, it's a myriad. We're made up of a community of people that were impacted in different ways.
Yes.
And so a lot of the folks that are okay and have access to water and resources are eager to come back. And there's a lot of discussion about extracurriculars. So we know that we can't return everybody into the school building, but perhaps there's a way in that guidance where there's some lesser thresholds for extracurricular activities, like athletics, like clubs, FFA, everyone's eager to do stuff. Are there, I'll avoid the word timeline, but are there any announcements forthcoming around our ability to engage our students together as a community on our campuses through extracurricular activities?
Absolutely. So I met with our high school principals on Monday, and in fact, some are here today. We're going to be meeting as soon as the board meeting's over to address the issue of extracurricular activities. Among extracurricular activities are things like our CTE clubs. We have some national competitions that can be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a student. And so we don't want to deny opportunities to our students. And so I've been working with Dr. Reed on what it looks like to be able to approve those trips to a state or national competition, what it looks like for our students to be able to prepare for that state or national competition to do their best. As you mentioned, athletics is a piece of that as well. We know that we have students who graduate on time because they participated in athletics. That's the purpose of education-based athletics. And so we very much appreciate all of the work of our coaches and communities about creating and maintaining and sustaining an excellent athletics program, which is a part of our excellent school system. In terms of the guidance document, that's a brand new document for opening schools without water. And it's primarily concerned with schools and being able to operate a school. And so what we're looking at is the opportunity to be able to return to, within athletics specifically, return to play for our athletes as soon as possible. Next week, we have 3 sports that start their playoffs: cross country, tennis, and golf. And so we wouldn't want our students to miss out on that opportunity because of things beyond their control. So we're trying to find a way that we'll be able to allow those to go forward. We also recognize that football, for example, football is the greatest gathering of community members on our campuses of anything we do all year. We recognize that as a pastime and tradition in our community that's well beloved by many people. Football season is quickly upon us. The state playoffs were backed up 1 week, and to give opportunity to schools across Western North Carolina to perhaps participate. Earlier, Ms. Churchill mentioned sharing facilities. Right now, we only have 1 stadium that has power and water, and so one of the things we're exploring is going to a jamboree style Friday night, Saturday, so we use our 1 stadium for all of our schools so that all of our students who are ready and prepared and would like to participate can. We want to do that very carefully because we don't want to add trauma to trauma as we move forward into reopening our our schools, understanding there's been great loss. And so we're trying to be really careful and thoughtful about making those decisions in a way that honors all 6 of our traditional high schools that participate in athletics. And of course, some of our at-large schools have students who participate in athletics in their base school. Extracurriculars, though, is beyond CTE and it's beyond athletics. It's also things like our arts. So our marching bands, we had to cancel or postpone the 50th annual Land of the Sky marching band competition that's looked forward to on the campus of Inca High School. It's been happening for 50 years, and it got postponed because of the storm. And so our marching bands would like to be able to have that opportunity as well. Reynolds High School had to cancel or postpone the Cedar Cliff Classic, which again, all of our bands and bands from across our state come and participate in. And so we're also looking at, can we get our marching bands back on campus, because they would be outside, which takes away things like fire suppression systems, and we have to look at, do we have porta-johns and bottled water, et cetera. So we are working on that, and we're trying to do that as quickly as possible because we understand the days on the calendar keep ticking by, and seasons like marching band season come to an end, and so we want to try to preserve as many opportunities for our students as possible. And so I'm hopeful to have some announcements, but as I shared with our principals, we need, from my perspective, unless directed otherwise by the Board of Education, we need all of our schools prepared to go forward together, because I certainly believe that we're a school system, not a system of schools.
Thank you so much for being so careful and respectful with that approach. I really do appreciate it. And last thing I'll just say before I'm done is just on the interim educational activities that we're planning, they are currently appear to be all digital. And we have students and families right now going through our pickup lines and drop-off lines to pick up water and food. And I just wanted to encourage us to consider adding a paper-based resource instead of just digital. There are, so my house included, we do not have internet. I'm the one in my family that has a phone that functions somehow, and I'm out of hotspot data for the month. And the rest of my family has to drive about 5 miles away to get any kind of cell service. So if families are already, and we have our schools in this kind of drop-off line process already for resources, if we could consider having some hard copy versions of those educational resources to provide folks that just don't have access and won't have access for a while. I was out in the community trying to help deliver a generator yesterday, and ran into a power crew that said that there will be red zones in the community that may not have power for months, right? Because of the magnitude of the infrastructure damage. And so it's going to be really difficult for that portion of our student population and staff population to really access things digitally for quite a while. And also bringing them to the campus, I think will provide some sense of community and normalcy to see their teachers and just be excited to be back on campus for a moment. So just want to encourage that. And again, thank you so much for all the hard work. I know your heart's in the right place and thinking about all this so diligently and respectfully, so thank you.
Mr. Elliott, thank you for highlighting that need. That's certainly something that we need to continue to grow in. The new resources are currently only available digitally, but they're non-digital activities. And so, as you shared, we need to get those on paper form so they can be a part of the distribution centers. I did want to, as you mentioned it, take the moment to highlight Laura Mitchell, who's our arts specialist. She's actually been taking arts kits to the shelters and to distribution sites, and it's been quite wildly popular. And so she's been going out and getting donors to give more art kits. And so our art specialist has been taking art kits to the shelters, particularly so students there can do things with their hands. And so I appreciate you highlighting that need, and that'll be something that we make happen. Thank you.
Isn't it interesting how when we get together, the talents that we have for bringing up responses to this, the obvious ones are at the end of our nose, but then other people can bring forth and contribute. I really appreciate this opportunity to have heard this information, and
Madam Chair,
uh-huh.
I didn't get the rest of my question.
Dadgum, Kim, I don't know
Sorry.
that you ever will.
And thank you, Mr. Elliott, for stealing my question. He's paying no attention to me. So I do want to go back to the sports thing. And probably of anybody that's sitting around this table, you all know me and I love sports. I believe sports keeps kids in school. It keeps them motivated to make good grades. And I recognize we only have two high schools that have power. But I've got some stats from Irwin High School athletics, and we're talking about, you mentioned the CTE things that kids have the opportunity to go to, and I am all about supporting those. I support anything that any child loves. The band is another thing that I really want to see our band kids back out there. And I've had a couple of parents call me that are band parents, but I do want to go back to the sports thing. At Irwin High School, we have 172 students that are in fall sports. 42 of those are seniors. I'm very partial to these kids, and I'll just tell you, because I've known them since they were 5 years old. My son coached them. They went to school with my grandkids. When they were in the 7th grade, they got their spring sports taken away from them because of COVID. Some of these kids have the opportunity to go to the next level and play. And I recognize we have 22,000 kids in 45 schools, but they're looking at Pisgah. Their stadium was damaged again. And they're playing, I believe, I pulled the schedule up and looked. These schools are playing next week. They've got football practice. Asheville High has it starting today. They're playing next Friday. I want to go on record to say, I think we need to make a decision as quickly as we can about our sports. And again, that doesn't mean just football. That means cross country, everything that's going on right now, which doesn't require up 5 days of practice or whatever. But that would get our band kids involved. That would bring our community back together. And I want to go on record to say, I really want our sports program to get up and going, because it just doesn't look like that we care about these kids. And these 19 varsity football seniors that I know and love, they want to get back on the field. And their coaches have checked in with them. They know them. They know if they need water. They know if their house is destroyed. They know what they need. And these coaches at Irwin, I got to hand it to them. They've done a great job. And I don't want to go on record to say, I think if we would do something, just that part, because if we're going to let some CTE things, folks go to national conventions, then we should let our kids play their sports.
Well, and so I want to very firmly assert, we love every single one of our students, regardless of their interest in the things they participate in. And so the CTE as an extracurricular, if we're doing CTE, we would be doing athletics. And so all of the extracurriculars kind of go hand in hand. So if we're doing academic extracurriculars, we're doing athletics extracurriculars, and arts extracurriculars. So all the extracurriculars today, all the extracurriculars at the same time. Our athletic directors actually met today. And so we are working hard on being able to understand, there are school systems around us who are able to return to sports. The difference is they have water. We currently have, though we have water at 2 high schools, we do not have access to North Buncombe High School because of Duke Power's completely taken over that campus as they work to restore power. And we appreciate the work they're doing. So we do have the one campus, and part of our work is to figure out if there's a way to use, and we've worked through some sample schedules, the one campus we do have. And so we're working hard on that, and I hope to have some good announcements. But I can share with you, as I'm sure you're aware, while we certainly have great passion around coming back and playing ball, I've also received folks who've said we shouldn't even be thinking about it because people can't get out of their neighborhoods, and we have students who can't get down the street because the road's not there. And so we are trying to move forward as thoughtfully and carefully and as lovingly as possible, recognizing that our seniors have one senior season, and so we want to preserve that. And so you know, we've been at many ball games together. I'm quite passionate about education-based athletics. I spent 7 years on the board of directors for the High School Athletic Association. But I'm passionate, as you are, about all 22,000 of our students and doing things the right way and keeping our students safe. And so we'll keep working hard on that. Thank you, Ms. Clemens.
Okay, what I would like to do is, to give our superintendent the go-ahead to talk to these, what are they called? The tank. To talk about the tank. And it seems to me that the tank, it seems to me to be probably the most efficient way to go, and not to take away from the trailers that the possibility, but it seems that that's a bit more problematic. And I'm getting head shakes from my fellow board members that they think that that's good too. So I would encourage you and Clark Wyatt and all those wonderful people to get out there and buy a tank.
Thankfully, we don't have to buy it. They're gonna buy it
Well,
for us, so
get a
we're glad
tank.
about
Yeah,
that too.
yeah. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second? Thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.